Athens was considered to be an ideal choice to stage the inaugural modern Olympic Games. It was unanimously chosen as the host city during a meeting organized in Paris in 1894 by Pierre de Coubertin, a French historian. The International Olympic Committee was also created during this meeting. When the Games were held 2 years later, 241 athletes from 14 nations attended. 12 special stamps were issued by Greece in 1896 to celebrate the first modern Olympic Games. From these stamps, I have selected one stamp from my Greek stamp collection. It is a 20 lepta vertical bronze stamp showing a vase depicting Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom in Greek mythology. She gave her name to Athens, the Greek capital city. There are no postage stamps issued by other countries for these games. The 1906 Olympic Games were held in Athens as part of a new schedule, where every 4 years, in between the internationally organized games, there would be intermediate games held in Athens. This was apparently a compromise. After the successful Games of Athens 1896, it was suggested that Greece should organize all future games. However, Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the International Olympic Committee, opposed this. So the 1906 Games were the first and the last Summer Olympic Games held in between the normal every 4-year Olympics, as we now know them. All the same, 20 nations participated with 854 athletes, including 6 women. 14 special stamps were issued by Greece in 1906 to celebrate these Olympic Games. From these stamps, I have selected 2 stamps from my Greek album collection. The first one is a 5 lepta green stamp with an image of one of the athletes, while the other is a 10 lepta red stamp showing Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. There are no postage stamps issued by other countries for these games. The 1920 Olympic Games were held in Antwerp, Belgium, and were the first in which the Olympic oath was voiced, the first in which doves were released, and the first in which the Olympic flag was raised. 29 nations were represented, with 2,626 athletes taking part, including 65 women. Curiously, the boxing and wrestling events were held at a venue in Antwerp Zoo. As the Belgian Olympic Organizing Committee went bankrupt during these games, no official report of the games was ever produced. 3 special stamps were published by Belgium for these 1920 Olympics. The one chosen from my Belgian stamp album is a 1921 overprinted copy of the same 1920 brown stamp with 20 cents overprint on the 15-cent image of a running athlete. There are no postage stamps issued by other countries for these games. In one of my French stamp albums, there are 2 stamps commemorating the games of the 1924 Summer Olympics that were held in Paris. Issued in 1924, the first is a 25-franc horizontal stamp in carmine, showing Notre Dame, the River Seine, and Pont Neuf, along with the statuette of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. The second is a 50-franc vertical stamp in blue, showing the victor holding an olive branch with an olive garland on the head. In 1924, similar stamps were also issued and used in Lebanon and Syria, both under French mandate at the time, being appropriately overprinted Grand Liban and Syrie respectively. It was the second occasion that Paris hosted the Olympic Games, after the 1900 Games. 44 nations participated in the Games, with a total of 3,089 athletes competing, including 135 women. Although these Olympics were held 6 years after the end of World War I, Germany was not invited. British runners Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell won the 100-meter and the 400-meter events respectively in these games. Their story was later told in the 1981 movie Chariots of Fire. The theme music of this film was used to a hilarious effect in the opening ceremony of the 2012 London Olympic Games, with a single D-flat note being continuously played on the piano by Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean. In 1924, American swimmer Johnny Weissmuller won 3 gold medals in swimming and was later best known for playing Tarzan in Hollywood films of the last century. If someone was born in the year 1924, they would be 92 by now. The last surviving competitor of the 1924 Summer Olympics was a Croatian swimmer who competed for Yugoslavia, named Ivo Pavelic. He lived to be 103 years old. 8 special postage stamps were issued by the Netherlands in 1928 for the Amsterdam Summer Olympics, 3 of which are shown here, selected from my Netherlands stamp album. The stamps are a 3-cent green, a 7.5-cent orange, and a 10-cent red, showing a footballer, a shot putter, and a marathon runner respectively. 46 nations participated in these games, with 2,883 athletes, including 277 women. For the first time, the Olympic flame was lit during the Olympics. There was no torch relay, however. This would not occur until the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. Also for the first time, the Parade of Nations started with Greece, the motherland of the ancient Olympics, and ended with the host country, a tradition which continues today. These games were the first to have a standard schedule of 16 days, which is still followed. Previously, competitions had stretched out over several months. Many cars were expected for the games, but Amsterdam didn't have single parking places for more than 2,000 cars. So, for foreign visitors, a symbol was launched where they could park their cars. The blue traffic sign with a white letter P would become the international traffic sign for parking after this. The 1948 Summer Olympics were the second time that London had hosted the Olympic Games, having previously been the venue in 1908. The Olympics again returned to London in 2012, making it now 3 times. In the 1948 Games, 59 nations attended, with 4,104 participating athletes, including 390 women. Germany and Japan were not invited, and the Soviet Union was invited but chose not to participate. 4 special postage stamps were issued by the General Post Office for the 1948 Games, 3 of which are shown here from my British stamps collection. All four stamps show the head of the monarch, King George VI, each with a different Olympic design. My three stamps are a violet threepence stamp showing speed, a sixpence purple stamp showing the Olympic rings, and a brown 1 shilling stamp showing an image of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. The currency of these stamps was in the old British pounds, shillings, pence system, which was changed to the decimal system in 1971. The set of Olympic stamps was also issued in other parts of the world where Britain still had influence at the time, and overprinted with local currencies where applicable, including Bahrain, Kuwait, Morocco, Muscat, and Tangier. The decathlon was won by 17-year-old Bob Mathias of the United States. He became the youngest ever Olympic gold medalist in athletics. It is reported that when asked how he would celebrate, he answered, "I shall start shaving, I guess." The 1956 Games were the first to be held in the Southern Hemisphere. However, they were prevented from hosting the equestrian events by the Australian quarantine regulations. They were held in Stockholm, Sweden, as the alternative site. The equestrian competition began 5.5 months before the main games opening in Melbourne, Australia. Sweden issued 3 special stamps for the 1956 Olympics, all showing an image of an ancient Greek horseman. They were 20 ore carmine, 25 ore ultramarine, and 40 ore grey-green. The 25 ore stamp is selected from my collection and is shown here. Initially, 2 special stamps were issued by Australia. One stamp was bright blue and the other bluish-green. They were 2 shillings each, carrying an image of the 1956 Olympic Games poster. The blue-green copy is shown here from my Australian stamps album. Several months later, 4 more special stamps were published, one of which is also shown here, being a 4-pence carmine red stamp with the coat of arms of Melbourne. Australia also issued an Olympic Games postcard. The javelin throwing Aboriginal art postcard is shown here from my collection with a 22nd November 1956 cancellation mark of a pole vaulter. With all the international tensions of 1956, a young Australian from Melbourne, John Ian Wing, came up with a new idea for the closing ceremony. Instead of marching as teams behind their national flags, the athletes mingled with one another as they paraded into and around the stadium for a final appearance before the spectators. That began an Olympic tradition that has been followed ever since.